was looking at Jacqueline's question in the chat. Well, the thing is, like, whenever someone says that I've done loads of stuff, I point out that, you know, my wife's an author of fiction, and she's published all these award-winning short stories, and she's written, I don't know, 5 novels. She just keeps writing them and hoping that one of them will be published. And so she's more indefatigable than I am. Which is kind of relevant to these poems because it's a book of sonnets, A Million Petaled Flowers Being Here, for my wife, the writer Jenny Holden. And so some of the poems are about kind of existing as 2 writers living together. The poems were written when we were still living in England. And this first poem is called Leeds, where, as Jenny pointed out, I'm from and where my parents still live. And it's about spending time in Leeds apart from Jenny when she'd be down south with her parents. I know there's a bit of Jenny doubling going on here, which is confusing the issue. Okay, Leeds. Leeds, where my parents live, and I place in my mouth with a fork, and not my hand, a polygon of potato, which has swum for hours amid lamb on the bone, coconut milk, black mustard, and fennel seeds. You're in Wiltshire. We speak on the phone as I leave the cul-de-sac, past where the nice houses are, down the oak dark lane, through the crossroads, and to the Norman church with its arch of hewn Aboriginal stairs. Long distance means talking every day with nothing to share. My emails are try-hard. Lolloping out of the daffodils in the pink light, I see a hare moving exactly like a faster creature in slow motion. I wish you were here. So I think as I was explaining to the other poets and to Jenny before everyone turned up, we're in a slightly weird situation at the moment. We moved to the US in January 2019, and of course when we did that, we didn't know that we were going to head straight into lockdown and that we wouldn't be able to see our families in England for 2 years or so. So quite a few of the poems I'm going to read today, I'm going to read 6 sonnets in total, so 5 more, are kind of about living in different countries, whether that's England or the US, or whether it's England and Sri Lanka, I guess, in most of these cases. And it's about migrating between different countries. And this poem is called Worry, and it begins with a bit of psychiatric advice from the NHS. And I love the NHS, and especially now we're in the US where, well, everyone understands the situation. And I'll never attack the NHS, but one of the things I think the NHS isn't amazing at is its provision for mental health, because what it tends to do is, if you go with mental health issues, you'll probably be assigned to sort of cognitive behavioral therapy or something like that, rather than anything much deeper than that. So they give you these sorts of advice booklets, and this first sentence is from one of those booklets. Oh, and I should also say there's a little joke in this poem because, in Sri Lanka, like in India, you have different castes, and technically my family is from the warrior or weaver caste, but in this poem I make a joke that it's not warrior with an A, it's warrior with an O. Worry. Worry isn't doing something about the problem. Train yourself out of these thoughts. So they say, but I think of my dad coming upstairs to ask in his quiet, sad voice, can we leave in 10 minutes for the station? Even though it's an hour till my train back to you, and he doesn't want me to go. His father's fists turned him mild as a Jane to his son, me. A boxing champion, he'd jog in his crop top around the lagoon, hunting snakes. Then he flew here alone. No wonder our tribe is of the warrior caste, thinking always of the vanished countries of the past and future, to draw a line between and know that we abide. So, because it's a book of poems for my wife, and like one thing I was very aware of is that like a whole sequence of sonnets written by a bloke about his wife, to his wife, in which necessarily she doesn't get to respond. It's sort of, it's a kind of thing men have been doing for centuries. So, also more recently, perhaps we've had, male poets who written whole books of poems addressed to their wife, but the wife's usually dead. Right? So Jenny is very much alive. And I don't know if you want to know what she thinks about all this, I guess you can read her writing. But one of the things I wanted to do in the sequence is to sort of explore some of the ways in which we're different, some of the ways in which we're the same. And I guess, she's a white woman and I'm a man of color. And in some ways, I think that we've been put under some pressures which are the same and others which are very, very different. And in this case, it's about something we have in common, about how I think we both have to struggle not to be excessively self-deprecating. In Jenny, I really admire the way that she's not full of opinions. I think that we have too many opinions at the moment. I think that online culture is all about opinions. I don't think opinions necessarily express what we really are. I think that opinions have all sorts of uses. So it's also a poem about that, about opinions. I've noticed something. We both peter out when speaking, saying, "But I don't know," or something. Why? In your family, talk is for the jousting men. You write, you listen, you read, you step back from an opinion always, as if saying, "Why bother? I could be wrong." Which I don't think of as being shy. You simply haven't the need to set the world to rights of a man. And what of my own habit of cutting myself off, less out of fear I'm talking crap than just in case I won't be understood? I was the special son, bigged up, hot housed, second generation precocious, unique and therefore alone. For what we've both learned is how not to threaten, how not to seem to know more than our place. Now, I'm quite a nerdy poet in that I like sort of verbal tricks and particular ways of arranging lines. There's a great danger in this, Robert Lowell has a line where he says that he memorized tricks to set the river on fire, somehow never wrote anything to go back to. So you start to get into this kind of word-bound way of thinking about sentences. But I really liked what happened when I was able to come up with, for the end of the last line in that poem with the not structure. So I wrote another poem like that, which has the same structure. I found it's better to just admit this because I found that clever people notice it otherwise. So this poem is called Strictly, and it's about a British institution, but of course we don't experience here in the US, that is Strictly Come Dancing. I know that in the US they have Dancing with the Stars, but it's not the same thing. There isn't the same feeling you have in the UK of how Strictly Come Dancing is very much part of the pre-modern ritual cycle of the year. It's like what a festival taking you through towards Christmas, and so that you don't just, I don't know, give up on life before you get to Christmas. I was at Cambridge College for a bit as a research fellow, and we had a new master of the college who formerly worked on the BBC, and he said, in television terms, we're all minorities now, because the olden days of everyone watches Morecambe and Wise, say, and then on Monday they all talk about it. It isn't true anymore because everyone can watch different things. Everyone's constantly streaming and watching different things. But if there's any program in the UK which is not like that, it's probably Strictly Come Dancing, or at least it tries to package itself that way. So here's a poem about that. Strictly, hard to live up to on Saturday night. I mean, the frictionless assimilation of sundry cultures, a sparkly cult insisting on their joy and asking why anyone must leave. Watching millionaires on a journey, I sense my face when you glance over fail in its smile, For we've drunk too much or not enough, and I'm too full of the thought of the passing weekend and the time we while away on the couch, both together and not. The time we kill with irony and ritual. Sometimes we embrace the spirit of the age, ordering, for instance, many takeaways. Sometimes we're ashamed and to save face, try hard to like what we're given, as if it were us grinning at the camera, not allowed to not be joyous. So here in the US, we're Massachusetts, we're very close to Walden Pond. Thoreau, one of my favorite sentences from Thoreau is he said, "How can one kill time without injuring eternity?" Which sounds brilliant, but it's hard to live by, like a lot of this transcendental stuff. This poem is a translation. It's a translation of a poem written by my grandmother, Kamala Bhushani Thirunavarkarasu, and my paternal grandmother. And she was a headmistress of a school in Sri Lanka. And we learned after her death, really, that she wrote poems, wrote them in this little exercise book. Some of the poems were about the work she did with so-called fallen women, you know, women who the system let down in some way or the other. It created a weird situation in our family because both my dad and my aunt, you know, her children, have translated her poems, and their translations are very, very different. and it's a bit controversial in my family. I keep meaning to ask my friend Shash Trivet to translate them so I have an objective source. But here is a poem that I did with my dad. And so it's a translation of Kamala Bhushani's poem. And it's called Party in my book because that's the word, Tamil word for one's paternal grandmother. Dawn. Darkness is done with, gone from the earth. The sun's red face makes the shapeless once again distinct. Foliage smothering the path, the kanika flowers like painted cups amid a tiny forest. As one corolla withers, there bursts the next from its green spike. The achieved bloom has learned to seduce. The closed bud just below goes untouched even by the shadow of an insect. Just a leaf, the bee says. Today's flame shrivels, but why make a fuss? The flower of tomorrow is yet to open. And just one more sonnet for me. So this is a poem really about Zoom and Skype and these video calls, and of course we're all dependent on them now. But something I realized was that even prior to lockdown, my extended Sri Lankan family, which is part of this Tamil diaspora spread over the globe, you know, many in Canada and Australia, because of the Civil War, because of what Tamils went through there, they had this way of acting as if speaking on Zoom or Skype or whatever was genuinely the same thing as being there in person. So my cousin might Skype my uncle in Colombo and they'll just leave the camera running. So it's like a sort of electronic conduit or passageway between these two nations. They're not even really talking to each other, just a way of pretending that they are together. And they're really acting like it's the same as being together. So I thought this is a poem which is kind of appropriate to what we're going through now. And it's about video chatting with my parents. My Sri Lankan family. My Sri Lankan family extends its electronic tentacles across the ocean. From the outskirts of Sydney, my cousin Skypes my uncle in Colombo every day. My parents live in Leeds, just 2 hours away, but here they are trying to fix the mic. She tells you at length about her divorced friend who's lonely and whose dog began to bite. Its name was Willow. It was a long willow-type dog. Crisply, he explains, it's a greyhound. They're keen to know our plans. Someone has wed another Tamil and of the same caste. Just like back at home, it's so primitive on our small island. Is the girl even happy? And my mother, you do not know that. They are very, very Asians. She is on my Facebook. Thank you.
And apologies in advance for the Peckham skateboards that seem to have gathered outside my, I'm afraid my windows are open because it's so hot. So I haven't actually written any sonnets of my own for about 7 years, although I was thrilled to be invited along to this and thank you for remembering I'd written sonnets. But what I have done recently is co-translated this book, Trust, by my dear Hungarian friend Anna Szabo. I don't speak Hungarian, but we're very good friends, and over 15 years we've worked together to make these poems work in English. And I just thought it would be nice to kind of wave this book about, because it just came out with Art this spring and she hasn't been able to come over or anything. But also to read, there's a really lovely sonnet sequence in this, and I've never read it out before. And translating sonnets was just the most fun I had doing this book. It was such a kind of technical challenge, but it was so kind of satisfying when it worked. So the sequence, this is by Anna. It's called The Women and Don Juan. And it's 5 sonnets, each in the voice of a different woman who has encountered Don Juan. And I think what's so interesting about this is sonnets are so often kind of poems of desire, aren't they, for some unobtainable female object. And all these women, you know, some of them desire him, some of these poems are lustful, some are more furious, but they all kind of add up to this, all these partial glimpses of this unobtainable object of desire who is a man. So The Women and Don Juan. Chamber. An old wooden tub, candle flame sways, shadows of furniture getting unstable. These walls are soft, the air is hard and throbs like hot iron. The table holds a porcelain bowl, slimy and black, leeches in a swollen bloody heap. Like a raw heart, not mine anymore, I just listened to its terrible beat. It came out of me, this dark piece of meat. It didn't want life, why be conceived? The maker who made it should take it instead. Dear heart, he said, was he really my heart? I don't think he'd come back now we're apart. He'd never lie down in a blood-stained bed. 2. Isabel lights a candle. Not me, but him. He caught me unaware as I stood in a robe, half open, silk, on legs that shook, that tried to hold me there, still standing with the wall against my back. He watched intently as I watched him see, self-revealed the way I trembled there. And in his mirroring eyes, I saw a me, my naked body doubled in his stare. Don't look at me like that. Kill or embrace. I should just hurl this candle in your face and die with you, whoever you might be. I am a man, he said with a curt bow, and turned and left me, shamed and nauseous now. Guards! It was endless and momentary. 3. Thisbe on the beach. It was the sea who pushed him to me, made him come ashore as if a bright, strange fish, his eye half open, narrow like a blade, under the thick black curtain of his lash. Stuck to his skin bits of the storm's debris, in his dark hair the salty seaweed clasps, how rough and slippery his naked limbs as flies allured towards his swollen lips. Beautiful. On my lap I took his head and laid my cooling hand upon its heat. I looked into his eyes for a long time. The sea is my relation, good to me, because I never loved with my body. He lends me this young god to use as mine. Donna Anna. To fool me, only with a ragged cloak. What did this piece of shit man think I'd do? I wouldn't notice, wouldn't care to speak, enjoy a fumble, and no matter who I made love to, or like one who keeps quiet, I'd find myself subdued and giving in to alien arms, although they are not right. Does he think I won't recognize my man just by his scent and by the shapes he makes? No words are said with liberties he takes, and I should be complicit, passive, flat, only obedient to his manhood's law, silently accept that's what I'm for, to do that thing just so, never like that. And final one, A Quick Affair. I always wanted to live just like him, stealing with my sword through the deep night and following each new adventure's scent to fall asleep in different beds each time. But as it is, I was born the wrong sex to see myself in each woman I met. A man knows that he is himself perfect because he understands the tricks of beds. I am a woman, but I'm not a mirror that any man who has a fist can shatter. They have a key, but still the lock is mine. I'm more than you, oh pretty Don Juan. To pick this lock will bring no great renown, because my door was always open wide. And a sequence in trust. I'm going to read a couple of sonnets. I think I have my most sonnets in this book, Changeling, which actually came out 10 years ago this spring and is still kind of my favourite book child, as it were, in a way. It's a book of folklore and ballads and kind of witchiness, but it's got a few sonnets in it. This first one is called First Sunflowers, and I wrote this after reading an anthology by Sarah Maguire of poems about flowers, garden poetry, in which she said she'd found in all her research very, very few, almost none, poems in which men were compared to flowers, and I thought I should do something about that. I picked Sunflowers because I'd also read Don Patterson talking about how the sonnet echoes the kind of golden mean, as it were, the golden ratio, and so does the sunflowers patterned seed pattern face. First Sunflowers. I watch them as they lean against the wall like lads behind a bike shed for a smoke. They nod all skinny legs and awkward tall. The leaves shrug in the breeze. Their faces glow. And things rush back. A boy who taught me lust, my arid mouth, the sun behind. He leaned, his hair a halo caught and drenched with light, his sprouting tongue, his limbs, his teeth swarm seeds. You see the way the florets are laid out. This is the golden ratio. They catch each other at the golden angle, meet as when our youth and fire and ache all match. Perfection's lost to me, but still the boys are beautiful and laughing as they blaze. Another sonnet from Changeling. I don't read this often, but I think it's quite interesting for what I've done with the turn, because I always love the turn in sonnets. For me, I'm always interested in forms that have a relation to content. I don't like doing form for the sake of it, but I'm always drawn to forms that have a relation to content. And so all my sonnets are about sonnety things, I think. This is about the transience of life. I saw a kingfisher, and it was gone before I could tell the person next to me there was a kingfisher there. It happened so quickly. And so the kingfisher kind of is comes and goes in the turn of this sonnet. Lines written on the Norfolk Broads. We drifted through warm currents, our hull chugged past windmills, sails as useless as fish bones, as mallards raped, as Egyptian geese shrugged, and flocks of plastic bottles caught in reeds. And then a glimpse of kingfisher, it zagged, sky-backed, sun-bellied, rainbowed out green, illumination in the margin inked with lapis lazuli, tiny machine. And in that blurred half second, how I missed the bird already the pang. My mouth hadn't the speed to shape the word kingfisher before it squeaked like the hinge of a door shutting, pierced the water's chest. We churn on through a world too slow, too fast. And one more from Changeling. It's probably my favourite sonnet I've written. I'm always really interested in that idea, Antony and Cleopatra, let Rome and Tiber melt, and it sounds all very romantic, and actually there's something about romantic love that's quite evil if you start thinking about it too much. And John Donne, that little world and everywhere, the colonialism implicit in that poem as well. So this is kind of my version of that. It's set in a supermarket. Dinner for two. The CCTV's globed eye stares me down. as in the supermarket's blinding maze. I pick spice from the Indies, Asian prawns and blueberries as dark as Incan skies, New Zealand lamb and Guatemalan peas. A girl tuts, no, the air miles at Munch too, and I too feel that bland guilt nag at me, but words of worlds are nothing next to you. I take my plunder home, prepare a feast, to show I care, to counter your day's stress. I pour Sancerre like perfume on your feet, the spoils of sea and sky, the east, the west. The earth contracts, our room is everywhere. In love one kiss, and any trade seems fair. Following on from that, the first poem in my last book, Incarnation, was a sonnet. And I've always been very interested in Shakespeare's procreation sonnets, the idea of all these sonnets telling the young man you must have children for the sake of the world and the future. I think when you're thinking about having children these days, it often feels the opposite. So I was quite interested in writing my own kind of procreation sonnet. Jordan, September 2012. It's a lot of sonnets in a row, this. I'm not used to reading so many sonnets in a row, but there's just 2 left, okay? If you get tired of my I ams, don't worry. Right, Jordan, September 2012. The Dead Sea's senseless brine spits me back up. The dry dawn brings mosaics of crocodiles, lamb fat and waspy figs and chariot ruts, and gargle smoke and broken citadels. Elijah's flaming horse and sunburnt tombs. Iraq and Syria and Palestine make borders sweat with refugees whose homes are shaken bones, the bank is occupied. Then, in my flesh, the sperm and egg collide. I shudder in the dry cave of our bed as life explodes, a bomb, a rose, a tide, as sun pours through my eyelids, Petra red. Yes, this is what the world needs, more of us. The foxes scream the dunes down with disgust. And I'm going to finish with another one from Incarnation. I had some of the only poems I've written over the last 2 years have been commissions, actually. This was a commission just before this book came out, which was to write a poem for the Christmas service for the Missing People charity. And Kate McCann, mother of Madeleine McCann, was going to read it. It was a very difficult brief. But I found myself coming back to the comfort zone, I suppose, of a sonnet, thinking the sonnet is often about an unobtainable beloved in some way, and trying to make it more of a universal poem for all of us who can't reach out or can't be with our beloved in some way. So I'll just read this to finish. I'll find it in my book. This is the contradiction. The absence contradicts itself. The missing conjures what we miss. You are not here. I'm not myself. But still, I talk to you like this. You're in the crowd, the news, the glimpse. I make you there when you're not there. I trace your steps. I map your face. I say your name, see you in air. You're all I know and so unknown. I cannot hold you, yet I do. Please let me hold you in my head, and where you are now, hold me too. How can you be so near and far? You are not here, but here you are. Thank you very much.
I find myself getting increasingly anxious, actually, as I'm just listening to these 2 poets whose work I adore, and who I think, if we all went away now, we would all be perfectly happy, because they, those sonnets were so lovely to listen to. And I was thinking about Dinner for Two, Clare, which I've taught so many times on sonnet workshops, and I think was the editor of Magma when that was published. I'm pretty sure I chose it from Magma, so it was great to hear it read. And the sort of breadth of both of what you both do, and the way that you the way that you read it is kind of overwhelmingly wonderful. So I was really kind of caught up, and then I thought, oh my God, now I have to read some. And I was thinking about you apologizing for your I ams, Claire, and I was thinking, oh, if you think Claire's got I ams, wait till you hear mine. However, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to squish in as many as I can, because I thought I'd sort of do a little tour of all my different books that have sonnets in them and finish with a couple from the latest ones. So this is from Dad, Remember You Are Dead. This is the canon, which is about everyone's right to write a sonnet if they want to. The men are in my room again. This time I wake with Petrarch panting in my ear, while the bard's at my desk checking my rhymes. Such joy. I kiss the poet's inky fingers, share my love, thanking them for form and beauty. But we don't like your lady stuff, your loose ways with art and man, they say, your take on history. Milton reminds me of my fall from grace. Wyatt tries to bridle me, and Spencer sits too close. The men push me towards the dark, but I'm too fast. You'll never stop my mouth, not now I've started. I can play rough too. I'll write my world, I'll take my place. I spit this shape onto the page, I make my mark. And when I read that, when I wrote that poem, I had no idea that I was going to get so obsessed with sonnets and kind of being this serial sonneteer. But much earlier on, this is the Kitchen of Lovely Contraptions. So this was my first collection. And at some point, my two oldest kids told me they were going to get tattoos. And I wrote this sonnet to try and stop them getting a tattoo, which is a really stupid idea, right? Because what teenager is ever going to listen to their mother through a poem? However, I think the poem is not really about that. Yeah, it's about it's about things we do that we can't change. Tattoo. A man with dye and dodgy needles waits behind a blackened window by the bridge. Check out his flash. A gaudy bird, a heart, a manacle, two fuck you fingers etched in red. Choose, then let him excavate your skin. At first the burn, later the itch, irrevocable ink. You may regret his handiwork. Be careful what you wish. No scalpel cure, no wash away design. Years later, bend the trackway of your spine, find yin and yang above the knicker line. Laser away. Old patterns will persist. Your skin remembers. Try this. Clench a fist or flex an arm and watch the serpent twist. Now this one is from All My Mad Mothers. So this I wrote for my son who lives in Canada, who at the time was a fairly militant vegan. He's calmed down since then, but he's still actually a brilliant vegan chef. And I guess if there's any hope in this world, and I think there is a lot of hope. When I look at my children, I see some of it, and I see some of it in him too. When I think of you, I think of dogs and wops and all things green, onions sweating in the pan and music, taste of plenty and a feast of grain, tofu pressing under heavy bricks, potluck suppers, names of vegan beers, long abandoned toys in cardboard boxes, blinks and sighs you think will hide the tears, of piercings, partings, oceans still to cross, protest, yours and mine, guitars, tattoos, my weary age, your optimistic youth, the way that water soaks through canvas shoes, of seas that rise to cloud, the common rain, of continents and shift, roots in the earth, earth in the blood, of harvest and of change. And I'm really feeling that poem today because I haven't seen him for 18 months, you know, and who knows when I will. So moving on to the sonnet sequence. So this is A Bargain with the Light, the sequence about Lee Miller, which Claire helped me with, actually. She looked at the final manuscript and gave it a good old going over, and is responsible for this collection really coming together in the end. So thank you, Claire. Nice to be here with you. And I wasn't sure which one to read, but I just thought I might choose this one, just because I don't read it very much. So this is, so each poem is based on a photograph. I don't know how well you can see this, but it's not one of her better photographs, but it's a photograph of women sewing in an enforced labor camp in a brothel in Dachau in Germany in 1945. So as well as being a photographer, Lee Miller had previously been a model and was also the victim of a rape when she was a child. And I think from my perspective, this kind of fed into most of the work she did. And one of the things that she was able to do was really dissociate from her subject. So by the time she got to be one of the first photojournalists inside the concentration camps at the end of World War II, she went closer to everything than any of the other photographers. And probably partly a result of post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm sorry to run through that so quickly because it feels like I'm really doing her a disservice, but I think it's useful to have the background to this poem. So this is actually in her voice. As if the storm inside can be erased by acts of witness, I become the still I, empty, curious. I load the human freight onto my film and let the image fly. I must not think. I don't discriminate. I merely scan and capture what I see behind the fence beyond the gate. This is my work, nothing to do with me. Are these the whores? Who knows? I raise my eyes. I share the mirror of my gaze. I know their little squall. Not like that hell too loud for human ears, that other pit too deep to dream about. But I must tell. I take it all. I focus, click, commit. I suppose that's what we're all trying to do, really, focus, click, and commit in some ways. So I focus, click, and commit on Lee Miller, and then I kind of do the same thing with Artemisia. There's her self-portrait right there on the cover of the book, and she's also behind me on the wall. Probably can't see her now. Very famous is the picture the painting that Artemisia painted of Judith slaying Holofernes alongside her maid Abra. Less familiar, but still quite famous, is one of them afterwards when they're thinking about trying to escape from the enemy camp, having just killed the general. And I think one of the things that drew me to this painting is that it's about female solidarity. A lot of the male painters at the time painted the maid as very much older and less capable than Artemisia did, but she really showed them together, working together. And in this, I guess, the character of Artemisia exists as much as the character of Judith. From her ancient world, she seems to rise and say, look at this harmless severed head, grey fruit in a basket, feast for flies with added colour, drizzled rills of red. Judith and Abra pause in unison, hold each other, leaning towards the dark. Listen, what lies beyond? Here's one man down, but only one. The women lurk and spark, all fired up. Drunk on the stink of bad blood, they linger in the light of this reversal before they turn to face a useless God. Perhaps they've got away with it, but still they look for mercy. As the bad blood dries, they offer up their truth, immortalized. So I'm just going to read a few from 100 Lockdown Sonnets. That's the least interesting title I've ever had for a book, but it really does what it says on the tin. So this is poem 1 from the 23rd of March 2020, and you'll probably all remember sitting in front of your TVs being told by the Prime Minister, stay at home, this is a national emergency. And you can hear me in this poem trying to get to terms with some of the new language I'm having to learn to deal with this pandemic. I'm standing at the starting line. Am I allowed to share my shadows if I disinfect? How do I dodge the shedders in the crowd, the howls of strangers? Watch me attempt the daily joy of blossoms, pink of hope before they fall, ditch the questions, wait, inhale the spring, ascend the hopeful slope to summer, then wander home to isolate. Oh, small, unwholesome sofa, keep me safe. Don't make me scroll again for risk and grief. Instead, I'll do the work, try to be brave, return to what I love. Pen scratch of faith. I'll let the sonnet school me like a child, learning the language, open and purified. And the sonnet really did help me get through those 100 days. So I'm very grateful to it. So some of the poems are more internalized and some of them are, I guess, more overtly political. So this is from the 7th of April. This is Sonnet 16, 2020. The government's chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, told Tuesday's Downing Street briefing the number of coronavirus cases in the UK could be moving in the right direction. We're talking about the 7th of April, 2020. And Boris Johnson was in hospital, and Dominic Raab said, Boris Johnson is a fighter and will recover. We love the NHS. While this useless case lies in hospital, some flunky bangs the drum of British triumph, blagging it. Dumb and closeted, no breath left to agonize, the sick man leaves his friends to fraternize with fools. With all their superpowers gone, they faff and fidget, hack and hum, predicting pomp and froth and better times. They conjure flattened curves and stocks of masks. They play the numbers while the sleepless nurses cry at ends of shifts, filming selfies in their cars. The people sweat, the ventilators sigh, the doctors go about their tragic task. The curve ascends, death crowds the corridors. I'm gonna go for 2 more. I think I've just about got time to squish them in. And I thought, when I saw this on my list of sonnets, I thought, why did I choose to read this one? And then I remembered that it's actually from the 8th of June, 2020. So it's today, a year ago. So this is sonnet, what is it, 68. I have to do the maths every time I look at the Roman numerals. Shielding for at-risk groups to stay in place until July 31st, said Sky News. It's like living underwater, swaying, soft and silenced in the green whoosh, where days become unnavigable continents. How many of the shielded take their place on some strange seabed, their nights untethered, only their calendars and telephones to find their bearing? Their inner weather changeable, their destinies unknown, they bob and suffer, weakened by the sludge of months. The doctor writes the medicine, the postman leaves the letters, but it's no touch for the shielded ones. Oh, strange new discipline, this distance between us, drifting through brine and fog, you in your ocean, me in mine. And, you know, most of us have had relatives we haven't been able to see, and many of us know people who have been shielding and have been alone through this period. So I'm just going to finish with this one because it's got a bit of defiance in it and a bit of hope, I think. So this is from the 18th of June, 2020. And the headline for this one, BBC News, the singer of We'll Meet Again, who entertained troops in World War II, has died. The anthropologists will have their day. History will come for us. We don't know what we're living through. We see only how high the walls, how fake the news, how deep the rut. We dizzy in our twisting narratives. We try to find the light. Our working heads knock out a plot. We track and trace. Our gifts are all we've got, and Vera Lynn is dead. End of an era, myth of a common cause. And what's the bloody point of art? Oh, please. Who else will tell the whip and weave? Our loss must not be of imagination. The libraries of the mind are open. The alchemy is strong. The dark dream howls and shows its teeth. Bring it on. Thank you. The problem is actually getting out of the pentameter when you've been in it for so long, when you start to try and write in open forms and it won't quite come. But I also think some people, speaking as a teacher, I'd say some people seem to have much more of a facility for pentameter than others. For some people, it seems to come very naturally, and some people have an affinity with a certain form. So, some people just might find a pantoum is something that they seem to work better with, or they might find that the villanelle is more of their friend. So, or the gazelle, for example. But so I think it depends very much on your temperament, really, what suits you, as well as just practicing and reading.
Thank you. Vidyan, Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jackie's right, but also you mustn't think your iambic has to be immaculate, because often people do, and they think it has to be tum 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 tum, but then actually you go read Keats or something, he's breaking it all over the place. So it's about building up that confidence. Just always read it aloud. I think that's the main thing. That's my iambic tip. Just reading it aloud. But the sonnet generally as a form, I think what's so exciting about it, what keeps it fresh, is it's almost a form that's a way of thinking, because you're always like setting up a question and answering the question, or setting something up and then twisting it. And I think that's what really draws me to the sonnet. In the same way I'm drawn to the dramatic monologue, I think, where something has to kind of happen, or a thought has to happen, or something has to happen. I'm drawn to those quite dramatic forms where it's kind of thinking aloud, so that's something to keep in mind when you're writing a sonnet, I suppose. Maybe think of the first date and then see where it takes you, see where it swerves you.
If it's a Petrarchan sonnet. And also, I mean, isn't it great with the Anna Sabo poems? And I wonder whether part of the reason you enjoyed those so much, besides the technical challenge, was the fact that they were both dramatic monologues and sonnets at the same time.
Yeah, love it.
It is about reading, and like if you read a lot of contemporary sonnets, like someone like Seamus Heaney maybe, and you start to get a feeling for how it works. And I guess what appeals to me about the sonnet is that it's a form that comes together. It can feel like it comes together for just a very short amount of time, and then you kind of let go of it again. So it seems to me like quite a modern form in that sense, that it's a pattern, but it's a provisional pattern, that happened to come together, and then it only lasts just so long. So I think those are the types of modern contemporary sonnet that I really like reading.
Say for the moment I'm trying not to write them, but the last sonnet in the 100 Sonnets does say, the sonnet does tell me we are not done, is the last line. So I think the answer is that I'll probably never get tired of it. I think as a way of combining thought and feeling, there's nothing like it. I've often wished there's a better form than the sonnet, and I've just I've tried all the others and I've got a lot out of them, but there's nothing quite like it for its brevity, its completeness. It's a kind of template, isn't it? That is infinitely malleable. But so you can be as precise or as wild with it as you want to, but it holds, it holds everything together in just a totally miraculous way. So I don't think I think it will always be the love of my life.
I'd like to write a sonnet sequence sometime, though. I've never done a proper meaty sequence where it all ties up at the end, Jackie. It's nice. I'm envious of that.
I bet you could do it if you wanted to.
Yeah, you could have the subject for it.
The big idea, yeah.
Writing sonnets at the moment. I'm trying to write different things. There was I mentioned Seamus Heaney. There was a review of Seamus Heaney by Clive Wilmer, which haunted me because there's a sentence in it where I had the chance to ask Clive Wilmer if he actually wrote this or if I just imagined it. And he said, it sounds like something I'd say. So he probably did say it. But he said, Heaney has become too dependent on the sonnet. And I don't think that's true about Seamus Heaney. But it's an interesting idea, isn't it? Like I started to worry that, you know, I'd become sort of automatized in some way. So I'm trying to write in mostly some open forms. I've tried to write in quatrains, and that's been really quite difficult because I think the quatrain has to be a bit firmer because, you know, if you diverge too much from the meter or the rhyme, you're kind of lost, and you know, each stanza needs to hand on the baton to the next one. So that's meant being a bit stricter with myself than I was.
I realise a poem's a sonnet, it's often because of its subject matter rather than it pops out as a sonnet, you know. And then I think I'm going to have to make this into a sonnet. It kind of goes that way around for me quite often. How about you guys?
Again?
Well, the thing about subject matter is interesting because it makes me remember that sometimes students get confused because they think all love poems are sonnets. You know, I remember that. So to define it by the subject matter, and then you have to explain, no, a sonnet is 14 lines or something like that. Now, I guess I kind of like making the content as prosaic as possible, you know, as totally...
Yeah, different. Still,
yes,
sequence to your wife, as you say, it's quite traditional.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. So it's kind of like, I felt that the poems which were more overtly love poems kind of gave me the license to stick in the other ones where, you know, it's a sonnet about gardening or something like that.
Yeah, I tell my students to never do that. But I like that it's a deliberate strategy you've got. I think you pull it off.
I heard this recently that there's a resurgence in form.
It's us three, basically, isn't it?
Sorry?
This is us, basically. That's why it's been us three. I don't think there's many others do. A lot of the young ones aren't doing form.
I'd say it's still quite unfashionable. You know, I think kind of open forms and experimentalism, and you know, the real kind of, you know, current avant-garde is much more fashionable. I feel like I'm not at all on the, you know, on the bleeding edge or anything like that. No, unfortunately.
I think there was a kind of, there has been a kind of decade, maybe a bit longer, of huge growth in creative writing courses and stuff, and that in some ways has probably led a partial resurgence of form, because what do you teach if you've got someone coming for night classes week after week after week? You tend to start teaching them the mechanics of meter and different shapes, different forms and so on, just for something to teach them each week, you know. I find I'm not teaching night classes anymore, so but I think that has led to a kind of partial, you know, boom time for certain forms that were quite obscure in the UK before, like you know, the Pantheon or the Specula. You've got thousands of students being asked to do them every week.
I'm just too obsessive compulsive. I don't want to write an almost sonnet. You know, if it's close to 14 lines, it has to become 14 lines. I don't want to, you know, if it's 13 lines or 15 lines, that's going to really irritate me. So I'm sort of interested in other people's almost sonnets. But for me, in fact, I worry about that a little bit, because you want to believe that whatever part of you is shaping the poem is you know, it's a sort of cognitive thing, and you don't want to believe that it's more like feeling you have to tidy up or arranging your cutlery so it's perfectly straight. But sometimes I worry, at least for me, that there is an element of just kind of slightly neurotic tinkering or hyper adjustment. And so for that reason, I think a 13-line poem or 15-line poem would just really, really nag at me, probably, until I eventually made it a 14-liner.
Yeah, I think I'd only like an almost sonnet if there was a content-based reason for it. You know, you could say to me it's a line short because, you know, the love affair comes to a disappointing and early finish or something like that, you know, then I would let it slide. But I think I would want a decent justification, because I think the reader or the listener would think, oh, you just couldn't be bothered there. So I think you have to be able to back it up with reasons of content. I agree with you, Vidyan.
Jackie, yes.
Yep, I agree with Vidyan, yeah. How could I not?
Lovely discussion.
And I agree with Clare as well. You know, I think the form needs to reflect content, and content needs to reflect form in a poem. And ideally, we're looking for some synergy between the two.
I've just been editing the summer Mexico issue of MPT, which just got sent off to press today. Mexican poetry is amazing. But in the general submissions at the beginning, we always have just general submissions. I've got a new translation of a sonnet sequence, Sonnet Redoublé, is that how you say it, by Inga Christensen, who wrote Alphabet, and it's called Butterfly Valley, and it's just absolutely astonishing. So I'd just like to big that up. And the other good sonnets I've been reading lately is, I've just got this, Wanda Coleman's Wicked Enchantment, edited and introduced by Terence Hayes. And I absolutely loved his American sonnets, but I hadn't realized they were inspired by her own American sonnets. And this book is absolutely insanely good. And I just can't believe I hadn't read it before. So I would highly recommend this sonneteer.
Okay.
Do you want to go, or shall I, Vidyan?
You go.
Okay, I mean, I've got, of course, as soon as I really started to think about it, I just sort of got my desk, went to my desk. This one really interesting, Diane Seuss, Frank, which is a kind of memoir in sonnets, and some of them are very sonnety sonnets, and some of them, as you can see from the page, probably are like quite long and strange. And it's pretty wild and very exciting. And, you know, she's had a pretty rocky life one way or another. And it's quite a thick book as well. And I'm really loving it. It's like really like reading a cross between a memoir and the sequence of poems. But also I've been, because of a current interest of mine, I've been reading the poetry of Yehuda Amichai, who is honestly absolutely amazing. Lyrical and political and really risk-taking. So I'd recommend him. And then also this Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. If you hadn't realized, that's sort of one of my interests. Anyway, it's like all about things like phones being too big for your hand, or your doctor giving you the wrong kind of drug, or whatever it is. And it's sort of to do with the fact that it's a world made to fit man-shaped people rather than woman-shaped people. And I'm going to finish with this one, which is which I did write a blurb for, Ruth Valentine's book, If You Want Thunder, which I really, really recommend. And I'm hoping people will notice it and read it more. It's about, you know, it's about the big things. It's about life and death, and, you know, and art and politics and war, and, you know, all those kind of meaty things. She's been writing poetry for a long time, Ruth Valentine, and I think it's relatively unrecognized in relation to how brilliant she is. So I'd recommend that. I'm going to stop now.
Brilliant. Like, what a list. Stunning. Vidyan?
Well, I've actually been reading some of this bleeding edge stuff that Jacqueline mentioned, you know, what the youngsters up to. So, you know, some post-lyric, as I believe it's sometimes called. So the books of poems which include prose, maybe found prose. So there's two poets I've been reading, and one's Vidyan Ravinthiran, who's got a book called Curb, which I've been reading and enjoying. And the other one is Dawn Lundy Martin. I've been reading all of her books because I'm trying to write an essay about her, but I think the latest one is called Good Stock, Strange Blood. And I think generally in poetry, we need to be more interested in what is not like ourselves. Well, we need to be more interested in that anyway, just as human beings, right? But poets can be very sort of parochial in a way, I think. And you know, I love lyric and sonnets and stuff like that, but I'm coming to see that I can also really enjoy all sorts of things that are not really what I would write or be able to write, but I'm beginning to understand them more and to see the sorts of things that those anti-forms or non-forms are capable of doing.